Hi, everybody. I'm Wes Tatters, Managing Director at Rapid.Cloud. Welcoming everyone to the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be producing over the coming months, talking about web technology, hosting technology, not necessarily things you may have heard about before, and a lot of exciting things to come. So keep an eye out for that in the ads and in the socials as we start to announce the different discussions. But today, we've got a very special guest with us. We've got Rob Seeger from Monarchs. Rob is the CTO. His bio reads probably differently to most traditional CEOs in a lot, or CTOs in a lot of ways, but let's throw it over to Rob to say good day and do a little bit summary of your career, a little bit of a background for us.
Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. Yeah, I think the part you're talking about in my bio is the fact that I was, in fact, a spy for the United States
Yeah.
government. I worked at the National Security Agency. That was the beginning of my career, and it's a lot of fun. Really interesting. I learned a ton, and then I've kind of taken that into the private sector, as it were, and honestly, I rejected the bureaucracy is really what ended up happening. And so I got into startups. Startups, there's zero bureaucracy, huge risks. It really appealed to me. And I've been, serial entrepreneur since then. And, yeah, it's been fun.
So we are going to be talking about malware today, and we're probably going to drift a little bit further back in your career
A little bit.
before the NSA. We'll leave that to later in the conversation, and people can get a bit more of an understanding of what you're all about. But let's dive into it and start discussing.
Yeah. So originally, the idea had been to really dig in deep on, malware. What exactly is malware? And I came to the conclusion that I think it's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more educational to think about it in terms of the people who are creating it. You hear ransomware and you have an idea of what that is, but why? Why does that exist? Who's doing that? How does it work? So that's kind of the idea behind this. Um, Spoiler alert, I do have some experience in cybersecurity. As I mentioned, I started in SA, but my startups have all been in cybersecurity. In particular, I transitioned from a more offensive role to now a very significantly defensive role, and so I've kind of played the field in every way you can imagine. So, please ask questions. I'd love to take them anytime. But yeah, so really, there are three categories of malware authors. You got all kinds of varied motivations, desires, etc. But it breaks down plus or minus to three different groups. The humans kind of behind it. The first group is what we call defacers. If you've ever gone to a site or hosted a site that gets redirected, and it says, King Defacer took this out, or la 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 was here, or, pro political this, that, or the other thing. That's defacement. That's defacement. These guys really don't have any specific desire other than to put a stamp on something and say, "I was here. I was here." My favorite part about these guys is that they think of it as an art. They're expressing themselves, but they also think that silly things like spray painting logos on cement, that's crass, that's horrible. But it's okay if I do it on the web and take out somebody's business, but it's super crass. But I'm an artist. It's an interesting mindset. And when I was looking to try to explain it, I'm using AI generators, you can probably tell from the images. And I'm trying to capture an image that would explain this mentality of, anything goes and this, that, or the other thing. And you can see that I actually typed in anything goes at one point. It kind of pulled that out. The reason I took this image, though, isn't because it was anything close to what I had described, but it actually does capture a lot of the different components of being a defacer. And so you've got the back room there, where you got this group of guys, oh, so smart, I did this, this kind of thing. And defacers really have this mentality of like, oh, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, showing off to their friends. You've got the trashed room. Um, they don't really care. They're not really focused in their personal life. It's not really an important thing. They exist in cyberspace. That's their world. That's the thing they're focused on and desired about. But my favorite, it might be a little bit hard to see, but in that upper left-hand corner, there's a woman depicted there. And the look on her face is this confused disdain of this guy. And that that is what it looks like anytime you try to describe your defacement exploits to someone who's not a defacer. They just they look at you, you're an idiot. I have no desire to be around you right now, and it hurts a little bit.
Do we have any sense? I know we talk about the size of the internet, and WordPress has 800 million websites, or there's 1.9 billion. Do we have any sense of the number of these sort of people that are out there? Is there any real knowledge of it or research being done?
For the number of defacers or the number of
Yeah,
successful
the
top
faces. Like,
websites?
well, yeah, I suppose it's both, isn't it? Yeah,
So it's actually not as large a number as you might expect.
yeah.
We see. I mentioned King Defacer because he's one of the ones we see, all the time. I'm sure if he sees this, he'll be thrilled that he got a call out for his work. But it's not as many as you might expect. My gut says 100, 150 really prevalent ones. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of small fries that don't bubble up into our conscious. But yeah, we've got 100, 150 different people or groups that, man, they just love defacement.
And as an art form, I suppose really we should start to be seeing that in art galleries and in showings, as opposed to just taking down websites.
I've actually considered, because a lot of them do have like art that they throw up,
Mm.
and I've collected this over the years, and I've considered actually throwing together, like a coffee table book, meet
Right.
meet the hackers kind of a thing. So yeah.
Crazy stuff.
It is, and the entire idea here is to capture what they imagine that they are. They imagine that they are the gods of the internet, that they control the entire world, that there's nothing beyond their reach. If they just put their mind to it, they win at everything, and they cultivate this mentality, not just with friends, but actually in the way that they write their malware. You
Mm.
can see them, like little comments they make, or they actually have arguments back and forth because they'll steal each other's code. And so in the code, you have arguments about, you're an idiot, you couldn't have thought of this, and they're like, it's pretty wild little world they've created. But this is how they see it. This is how they think of themselves. Uh, in reality, it's a little bit different. You really just Google it, and you can pull up of these top things. There's about 1,200 different exploits. You can just download, click a button, and it'll shotgun the entire internet with these 1,200. You will get plenty of hits on that. If you'll indulge me, I actually have a bit of a personal
Let's go with
story
it.
for this is way back in my career. It was pre-career, actually. I've been a defacer. I didn't actually do it for websites. That doesn't make it better, but my target was actually Unix systems. This is way back when had war dialing, which for anyone who doesn't know is when you just call every single phone number and see if a computer picks up, and if it does, you interact with it. What are you going to do? And there's one in particular. So I would log in and I would mess around with the what's called the message of the day. So when the admins would log in, they'd see whatever dumb thing this kid had decided to write. I mean, I was a brilliant author in my own mind, but looking back, I pretty much just annoyed them. But one of these guys, they didn't lock me out. I was able to do it day after day. Usually you get in, change the message of the day, and they boot you. And that's it. You never have access to the system. But this guy didn't. And so I really started to mess with him. I was like, you need to update your operating system. This tool is bad. I went all in. But I had access for the first time to a full Unix system. That was not something I had at the time. And so I started playing with it. I'd run random tools. I'm doing all kinds of exploration, and eventually even got into a little bit of coding. Like, hey, I wonder if I could make something that did this. I wonder if I could make something that did this. And I did. I had an interesting idea that I believed would still work, and I ran it without any thought or care about the damage it might do. And I bricked the hard drive on this machine. It took me years to figure out that it would happen. At first, I just thought that he found me and booted me, and I never had access. But I took that server down, and I feel to this day I feel bad about it after I realized that. But what are you going to do when you're
But
young and stupid?
this is part of the problem with young and stupid, I guess, to a certain extent, is that even for these defacers who believe it's an art form or believe it's a a statement against the man or whatever it is, they are impacting sites. They are impacting people's livelihoods.
Yeah,
Sometimes their revenue streams, their
business
plans
reputation.
for businesses. Yeah,
It is incredibly harmful, and really, being young is no excuse. I mean, the damage I did, I have no idea. The damage that these guys do is, especially in aggregate, just absolutely astronomical amount of damage these guys are doing. It's actually, I don't like talking about monarchs, when I'm chatting with people, but it's one of the kind of the ethos behind monarchs
yeah.
is to try to make it so that these little guys, they don't ever have to think about security.
Mm.
They should, in my humble opinion, shouldn't have to think about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
It's not your expertise, it's my expertise. Let me take that off of your plate. And we take care of a lot of these defacers, and hopefully the people who are running those sites don't even know there was a problem. It's just done.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things I must say. I mean, we obviously use Monarchs at Rapid, and we see sites being hit. We see sites being attacked. The customers not being infected. Their sites up when they come back on at 8 a.m. in the morning, because there are people out there doing their duty and ensuring that these sort of hackers don't get through.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very challenging place to be on the defensive. One of the fun things about being on the offensive side of cybersecurity is you always win.
Yeah.
You give it enough time, you're going to figure something out. And the defensive side is a lot more gratifying. It means a lot more to me,
Yeah.
but it's kind of rough being on the other side of that equation where you're there. You got the entire world you're trying to defend against, and yeah, it's a challenge. So I know everybody's going to be surprised, but I do have to admit to you that governments write malware, and like to think that it's just the United States government, the big bad boogeyman, but that's not true. Malware is too useful a tool, and in fact, governments do write it. The problem that they run into is very, very, very different than other malware authors, though, because they've got attention. There's really only two things that they want to do with malware. And the first one is kind of a long game. You want to put something in there. It's really, really sneaky. It's never detected. Maybe you can use it for some espionage, see what's coming on. Or maybe at a later date in some future imagined chaotic world, you could hit a button and this thing will, take out that server, that network, or whatever it is. The challenge with that is you also don't want to just scatter this stuff across the world. because there's a real risk that it'll be identified. And if it's identified here, it's just going to race through the community. Everybody's going to identify it, and all of that work, all of that money, all of that effort that you put into getting this thing placed right is just taken out. And so you have this scenario where you have incredibly powerful tools that are deployed in very sensitive places that don't get used because it's too risky, or only get used occasionally because it's too risky. And so it's a very, very interesting tension that goes kind of with the long game there. And then there's the other side of the coin where you've got a very specific, or you're actually triggering one of those destructive mechanisms for what you've played in. That 100% ends the malware. The malware is compromised; it's useless from then on, but it can be incredibly effective. The first known real physical impact from malware is Stuxnet, and if you do a little bit of research, you can figure out maybe who was behind that. But
I think there's also a feature film that sort of kind of pretends to have the answer
it
to that
goes
as
into a
well.
little bit of detail. If you're interested, I'm sure you can do that.
Yeah.
But this piece of malware is one of the cooler pieces of malware, I think, that's ever been unleashed kind of into the world. And so for anyone who doesn't know, this was unleashed on Iranian centrifuges. And what it did is it disabled essentially the shutoff, the detection that said, hey, this is too hot. And so these things just spun and spun and spun and spun and bricked themselves, all because of a piece of software. And that kind of the magnitude and impact that a little piece of software can have in the real world, it really clicked for people when this. And of course, there's been tons since, but this was the big deal, big day.
I think we also had a recent, I guess it's not directly malware, but we had the Israeli pager attack or incident. Again, similar sorts of things. Incredibly deep planning, long supply chain, getting well, not just malware into a device, but actually
a little bit of malware with a backdoor with a payload that's
payload. Yeah.
I have some relatively strong opinions on that. I'm not a huge fan of that particular one. The centrifuge incident definitely cost a lot of money and set back a program that they were very passionate about, but it didn't kill anybody.
It didn't kill anyone. Didn't cause harm. Into health.
Exactly. And I don't know. Everybody in the malware or in cybersecurity or governments or whatever, they have their own personal lines about where does this actually turn evil. And for me personally, that kind of crossed the line.
We'll say crossed the line, but we'll leave it there.
Yeah, exactly. But you're absolutely right, though. This is real. This is immediate. This is ongoing. In fact, when the war in Ukraine kicked off, there had been, just an absolute influx of incredibly good tooling, because everybody essentially fired their tooling, which ultimately got it released into the public. And then there was this incredibly high-powered, valuable tooling that just hit the entire internet right afterwards. Is enormous mess. So this, when you are in the government doing cybersecurity, this is how you feel. You are the armed forces of the cybersecurity world and feel like you're on top of your game. You do have some limitations that you might not realize that I was talking about, but you feel like you're there, you're part of it. It's not really accurate to reality. It's still the case that the most efficient, most effective, most common way to do all of this is really just person to person. In the government, you've got SIGINT, signals intelligence, which is basically anything tech related that you're using, and HUMINT, which is human intelligence, and it's significantly more likely that the human is in the loop at the very least. And sometimes it's money, sometimes it's whatever the person's interested in, but humans are always the weak link, always. There's a interesting little anecdote about Snowden, if you and your
Yes.
viewers are
Let's
at
let's head
all
down that
interested.
route.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually knew Snowden before he had joined the
Mm,
government, but that's neither here nor there. When he was in the government is when things got interesting for him,
yeah.
and he was kind of I mean, he was given security clearance, so he was brought behind the curtain to see things that are very, very sensitive. To give you kind of an idea about how sensitive, if you think about World War II,
Mm,
the Allies had developed all kinds of technology to detect the U-boats. One of the most famous was cracking Enigma, but there was actually a
mm,
number of different pieces of technology that went into it, and they could detect. They knew about these U-boats, you know, hours, sometimes days in advance about what they were going to do, who they were going to attack, uh, who was going to die,
mm,
civilians, military, so on and so forth. And they had to make a decision, and that decision was essentially to allow people to be murdered in
mm,
order to protect the technical advances. And so they did. They applied some statistics and some other things to determine who lived and who died. And it's really hard when you think about it from the operator's perspective, from the people who were
yeah.
making those decisions, because they knew full well what they were sentencing people they
Mm,
didn't go and protect too. That kind of thing, that kind of gray,
yeah.
sad, like tough world did not stop with World War II. That is absolutely the reality of the human race way before World War II and clearly after.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit dark. It is a little bit hard to stomach for a lot of people, honestly.
Mm,
And I don't know. I didn't talk to Snowden
not
afterwards,
afterwards. No.
but based on his documentary, things he said so far, the moral outrage that he has at least claimed, I believe that that's really what got to him. Is he could not handle the gray area, and then somebody turned him around these areas where the headquarters for these buildings are. There's
Yeah.
always a ton of um, hostile, for lack of a better word. It depends on
Yeah.
which side of the coin you're on, but
Yeah.
hostile operatives. And I would bet any amount of money that somebody turned Snowden. They took
Yeah.
his little bit of moral question, like, hey, this doesn't feel right. Took his savior complex, hey, I wanted to do something really, really special. I wanted to be that soldier in
Yeah.
cybersecurity, combined it. And he
Boom.
is actually responsible for the single greatest, most damaging, destructive intelligence leak in history.
Yeah.
He
Exactly.
he just wholesale hoovered anything he could get his hands on, and I don't know if you're aware, but like people died. This wasn't
Yes.
a like, oh wow, the United States lost some tech. This
No.
is
There were
humans.
real impacts, real human
Yeah,
impacts. Yeah.
exactly. And for some of them, dying was probably preferable to what's ended up happening to them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's
It's
a,
the
it's a dark
hardship.
world.
Yeah.
It's kind of a
Yeah.
but what are you going to do now? Now he gets to be Snowden's goldfish for the rest of his life.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
the the third group is criminals, and this picture is nothing to do with what actual criminals look like, but the AI did it for me, and I couldn't resist. It's fantastic. Um, Criminals, though, are very, very simple to understand. They're out for money. That's what they're looking for. They want to translate their capabilities into money, and really, they've got really high level only two ways to do that. You can target a few to try to extract a lot of money, or you can target a lot of people to try to extract a little bit of value across them. That's actually the exact same economics that any business
Hmm.
ends up in, legal or otherwise. That's your business.
Yeah.
Are you targeting the masses, trying to sell a product to everybody, or are you going after bespoke, very targeted customer set that you're going to try to
Yeah.
charge quite a bit more for? It's no different. It just happens to be, in this case, illegal. But like any good software company, writers, creators, it's all about the requirements. You give these guys the requirements. I want it to run on this. I want it to pop this. I don't want it to be detectable by this. I need it, so and so. And you'll get back a bid. Here's the plan. This is how long this is going to take. There's risk here. Some of it's just a software contracting world. It's a little seedier, a little shadier. Money doesn't change hands with credit cards as often, but that's what's going on. It's just software based on requirements. It feels like outsourcing.
I seem to recall from a conversation in the past that in the past you may have built some software.
I may have. I liked to imagine that this was how things were going. That I was, just a normal software engineer, and everything was legitimate. And I think that's common. I don't think any of these guys imagine that they're in this crazy seedy world. But so let me kind of explain what it was. It in the malware or cybersecurity world, there's something called a keylogger. And the whole purpose of a keylogger is to do exactly that, to log every key that the person pushes on their system. These are incredibly valuable. As you can imagine, if someone could read literally everything that you have typed, the amount of information and even more importantly, insight into who you are. Think about all the things that you deleted or not sent or all of those. Not all of them, some of it's just mistakes, but a lot of them are actually a much more accurate, raw view of who you are, what you're thinking. Basically before your frontal cortex kicks in, is like, don't do that. What are you thinking?
It's at the no filter level. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think most of us think of, it's going to capture my credit card detail, or it might capture my password, but the deeper reality is that it is almost capturing a stream of consciousness. And if you poured that now into an AI, you can get an incredible profile of an individual based on a day's worth of, or a week or a month or a year's worth of typing on a keyboard.
Fantastically. And you talk about stealing a credit card, maybe, but if I had a keylogger loaded somewhere, I would wait the week or 2 weeks or whatever. I would learn about them. I would learn a little bit about their motivations. I would figure something out, and I would go for a much bigger scam against them, because I would have so much personal information. They would be at such a disadvantage to any attack. They would probably be willing to give you very dumb amounts of money in many of the different scams that work. And it's sad but true. The keylogger is a lot more valuable than scraping credit cards, though you can scrape anything you like out of it. But it's a lot simpler on the surface than it might sound. Your operating system has a function. You can just say, hey, I want to see every key. And the operating system just creates a pipe and sends this program, just any program that asks for it, just sends it to whatever program asked. Did my camera go out for you, or is it just...
We just lost your camera. We'll wait for Rob to come back. Welcome back. No, we haven't got your microphone, Rob, but we've got your camera. There we go.
That live?
Yeah, we are.
Somebody did not want me to share a little bit of details about keyloggers. I think that's anyway.
The government stepped in.
It's important. It's important to know and understand the priority that my existence is in the world.
So I understand that you built one.
I did, but it was kind of special.
Tell us a little bit about it.
It was kind of special because normally you ask the operating system, but you can also ask the operating system who has that, and you get a list, and so you just kill everybody who shouldn't have it, and that's cybersecurity. The people who hired me to write a keylogger had a very specific requirement. They wanted it to load at the BIOS level. And if you're not familiar with the BIOS, it's kind of, you've got your computer hardware, then you have the BIOS, and that translates all of the nonsense transistor raw things into a somewhat unified surface to program against. then you have an operating system, then you have the software that you're accustomed to dealing with. The nice thing about hacking the BIOS, though, is that it's impossible for the operating system to know
That it's there.
something went sideways in the BIOS. And so I wrote a keylogger that intercepted the signal, the electric signal from your keyboard through to the operating system, literally right in the middle, and stole it and copied it off. And it worked really, really well as long as you typed very, very slowly, because I was young. And I wrote every letter to the disk one at a time. There was no caching. There was no nothing. And at the BIOS level, the way the system works is via interrupt. So you say, go do this, and it will do that. And if another hardware interrupt, another surge of electricity basically comes in, it will attempt to preempt and stop that thing and do another thing. If you're waiting for a disk write to finish, and you interrupt it at the electrical level and say, do another disk write, the hardware, the actual hardware will just lock and your whole system goes down. So really what I did is create a bomb. As soon as you try to type your password, the system locked up. But I did get paid for it. They didn't realize the issue either. So
so that's keyloggers. Where do we go from there?
So this is a little more accurate, although AI wouldn't really let me give an accurate thing. Really what I wanted to kind of finish on, is AI. I don't think people realize how impactful AI has been to the cybersecurity world. There's always been a growth in malware. It's more money, more malware, more software developers kind of a thing. The growth has been fairly predictable. You got, say in 2020, you got about 600 pieces of malware, unique pieces of malware developed every day. It's certainly not small. It's an avalanche, but not big. That was growing. 2021, you got about 1,000. 2022, actually, 1,500. So you can see a little bit growth. In 2023, there were 30,000 pieces of malware developed every day. And that was the very beginning advent of the LLM push, where people really started to understand. This year, it's actually over 1 million every day.
So how do we stay ahead of that? I mean, I guess this brings us, to a certain extent, to Monarchs and what you're doing in that space. But how do we stay ahead of it? How does someone with a WordPress site, how does one of our Rapid customers, how do people in this space even keep ahead of that millions of bits of malware? And
so
what do we do?
If you're a Rapid customer, you don't have to do anything.
I appreciate that, but
you're done. You won. Congratulations. Honestly, and I obviously am very biased to Monarchs. You should Monarchs will do this, but don't try to tackle this on your own. That's the real takeaway. Like, this is more than a full-time job. This is something that you need a team of skilled researchers to combat. I mean, the onslaught of this stuff is incredible, and the only way to effectively do that economically is to kind of centralize it, to get a team, of intelligent people that are working, because when they solve it at one place, they solve it across the entire infrastructure. And that's really what Monarchs does, is to centralize that and to expand and protect everyone based on that knowledge. But the onslaught is real. This isn't kind of a like, oh, Rob thinks big numbers are cool. This is an existential, that the world is changing for the worse because of this usage of AI. And if you don't have a provider that's helping you with that, please, 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 please get one before you end up in a world of hurt. You don't want to be the person who's saying, I'm hacked, I need help, because the brand damage, the loss of income, the loss of your customer's credential, all of that has already happened.
So we see security discussed at different levels, and obviously we see it, from the Cloudflare block block yourself at that end, or we put it in a plugin inside WordPress, or um, is there a level of effectiveness, or is it, how do we? It's hard for a person who's building a WordPress site that just hears all these buzzwords and jargon to even make sense of it.
So it definitely can be. It's like most technical things. If it's explained, you'd be like, "Oh, that's it. Why are we using all these stupid words?" So
Yeah.
the different layers of security is how you think. And Cloudflare is basically at the network edge. There are some things that Cloudflare can do better than, well, someone at the network edge, whether it's Cloudflare or some other players,
Mm.
can do better than anyone else. And distributed denial of service is one of those because they can keep it off of the systems. They can keep it basically in the cloud, but they're not actually great at other components of it because they don't have the freedom, the processing time to be able to make difficult decisions. So they have to default to Go. In order to get the page load times, they have to default to Go. So it's actually pretty trivial to sidestep them for any of the, if you run through the 1,200 tools that you can get with Google, the vast majority of them just fly right through Cloudflare. It kind of is what it is. And so your next layer is effectively on the server. And the server itself has some network protection that you can do.
Firewalls are the most common, sort of.
That's exactly it.
Terminology.
Basically, like, this is a bad IP. Don't do that. Don't do that. They also have a little bit of the detection of, hey, I think something bad is going on. But again, you're in a really sensitive place in terms of processing. There's just so much you can do.
Yeah.
If you go inside that, there's a term called RASP. Really what it means is that you're in the application that's doing the thing. In Monarch's case, it's the PHP engine. And when you're running inside the engine that is going to be doing something bad, you have so much information and visibility. Your ability to make educated decisions about what to block, what not to block. It's truly the best of all worlds in terms of information. You have everything that's going on at any moment to be able to make your decisions. And so we do, and we're able to prevent a ton of stuff that just isn't possible to prevent further up because of obfuscation, because of, you can send the information across different packets and it's difficult. There's all kinds of different things you can do to make it difficult to detect. But the PHP engine has to run it. At the time we're there, it has to make sense. It has to all work. And so we can just say, no, you're not allowed to inject that malicious admin user. No, you cannot load that fraudulent plugin. No, you can't do this. And we're a little bit different than security plugins you might be familiar with because we are loaded at the engine level. Like we are actually modifying what PHP means on that server, as opposed to a plugin which is simply sitting at the same level of privilege as the attacker. And if you're curious, you want to do this, you can go Google, how do I circumvent security plugin, and they'll pick a plugin and they'll be like, hey, you just call these things, it'll unload the plugin and then do whatever you want to do. And we don't have that challenge because of how we're in the engine. And then our bread and butter, our core product is even after that, it's at the system level. And the reason for that is because even then, even when you're in the RASP and you have all of that information, you still can't protect everything. There's going to be a percentage of things, like I was saying earlier, that get through. They just are. There's going to be messes. The messes are actually the most similar. Even though there's a million pieces of new malware, that's far less than there are novel attacks across the network. And so that very backdrop, we'll clean up the mess and we'll do it instantaneously, is kind of the final level of defense. And it's really where we've tried to make a name for ourselves in that final layer. And I personally think we're very effective, but it is challenging. It's something you got to invest a lot in.
Is there any particular things that you see often or any particular styles of attacks that seem more prevalent, or anything that stands out for you, I guess, because you're obviously seeing these things happening every day in real time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so you kind of got two different ways to think about that. If you think about like just sheer quantity of stuff that exists, it's going to be the phishing kits, the adware kits, the search engine optimization abuse, those kinds of
Mm,
things. Just the quantity of that stuff is absolutely insane. In terms of like trends, what's clever, what's really
mm,
dangerous in my mind, kind of what's up and coming.
yeah,
It's been going on for a while, but it's really ramping. That's more of the inserting malicious admins,
yeah,
installing malicious plugins, shotgunning the database with your malware. That type of activity is really the new up and coming. And you can do most, if not all, of the other
mm,
stuff that way. It's just a much more powerful, dangerous mechanism for delivery. And I would say that's probably um, the thing that stands out the most.
I've seen a lot of discussions recently about site takeovers, but they seem to be hidden takeovers, I guess. How would I describe it? So the site's still running, it
Yeah.
still looks fine, but sitting underneath it is now Bitcoin farming engine, or a DDoS,
Bot.
orchestration bot.
Yeah. Or a little
Sort of
spammer.
where. What is the motivation? Are they being paid by? Is this corporate? Are they, or is it script kiddies? But what do you feel? What's the motivation behind this sort of thing? Obviously, I take out the Bitcoin engines because that's pretty straight.
Yeah.
We know
Just
what they're
run it for
after.
money.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I think probably the most interesting one to me in terms of motivation is
Mm,
actually the phishing. Or the dumping all of the credentials and credit cards and all of that information and piping those off of a backplane. Uh, the reason I think that's the most interesting is because there's actually a vibrant economy, information economy around that information. And as you say, you don't compromise the site. You want as many people on that site signing up, logging in. If anything, you want more. You want to help the site get more traffic because
yeah,
every single one of those is valuable to you. But if you are so inclined, it's actually not very hard to go to the dark web and actually search for these information dumps where you can get just ridiculous amounts of detailed information about people to include credit cards and bank accounts and things of that nature and buy and sell them. And I think that's the most interesting motivation because it's very, very low bar to entry. The tools to do this are readily available, and the amount of money that changes hands for people who are stealing that information is more than you'd expect. Of course, the FBI or whatever the agency is
mm,
going to have something to say about it, and there's a really high probability you'll eventually go to jail.
yeah.
But it's not actually difficult to get into, unfortunately.
So I want to ask your opinion. It's possibly a little controversial, but
Those are my favorite.
yeah, yeah, I know. So one of the big conversations, obviously, in the WordPress space and in the security spaces, are things like protecting your site using 2FA and MFA type, um, you know, protocols to keep people out. Um, you know, I guess the question is, are they effective? Can they be compromised? Are we to a certain extent sometimes throwing things at the wall and going, sure, we've done that, now we're good? Or do we need to be much more proactive and thinking about what we do?
So, to your point, a little bit of controversy here. 2FA isn't as slam dunk a thing as you might
Mm,
expect. There are definitely ways to compromise it, but even more directly, why bother? Why not just insert that admin user? I don't need
yes.
your credential, your password, your anything. If I do that, you can 2 after FA 3, whatever it is you want to do. But
Mm,
even before that, there's an entire scam industry that you can look into where they've got really effective, smart ways to abuse human psychology to just get you to give them the number. I don't
Social
know.
engineering.
Yeah, I don't know if people are aware, but what is going on with my camera? Can you still hear me all right?
I can still hear you.
All right, well, let me see if I can't. I'm going to unplug it and plug it back in and see. That's the super
The
smart way to
technology fix
handle
for
these things.
everything. Have we tried turning it off and on again?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the um, the site
Yeah.
that's asking you for your 2FA thing, it does not have to look like the bank site or your website or Google site. All it has to do is collect that information and then pipe it to the Google site or the your bank site or whatever it is. And so you'll have there are scams where you have a completely independent page that is a totally different company or that looks like the Chase company but isn't. And people just type in the 2FA. So it's not the be all and end all that people kind of sometimes think it is.
Excellent. Well, we're getting it to we're about the 45-minute mark. We've been talking a lot about malware,
Talked
and
your
we
ear
knew.
off.
Well,
Apologies.
it's good. No, not at all. Is there any, in your mind, key takeaway that people should have when thinking about malware, and I guess specifically in the WordPress space?
Well, this is definitely accurate for WordPress, but in a little bit broader as well. Passwords, specifically your email, your primary email password. You might not think about it every day, but if somebody compromises your primary email, they own everything. They can reset every password. They know everything that you've ever signed up for. They can read. Your primary email is everything, and so protecting that is paramount. But your logins to the different sites. One of the most common ways to get into these sites is just to guess 100,000, a billion different passwords and log in. If I could give one thing to the entire audience that ever sees this, is use a password manager. It doesn't have to be one that's expensive. You can go and get the open source ones and use those if you want, but use a password manager. Humans cannot create secure passwords. We just don't think that way. And so that would be my recommendation.
So less people using their dog and their date of birth.
For real. For real. Also,
Sometimes
update
their
your
dog and
stuff.
their date of birth
Update
together.
your
But
stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, I probably don't know, but if you have an 8-character password, it takes my GPU here 5 minutes to go through literally every possible 8-character combination. So it doesn't matter what your password is if it's 8 minutes or if it's 8 characters.
So password 123 and it's probably not that much safer than sort of 14 eight unique letters.
Nope. It's equal as far as I or any attacker is concerned. Really, the only defense is super long. Yeah, if you've got a 24-character password, as long as it's not words, you're probably in decent shape. But remembering a 24-character password is a little hard. So use a tool that's custom designed to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, and patch your stuff. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was about to say. Obviously, we also use PatchStack, which is another tool in this space.
Huge fan.
Oliver and the team there do amazing work at the other end of the stack, but we're still only as good as how do we find these things? How do we discover these attacks
AIs.
before they become?
Well, before they become, I don't know, but the way attackers are doing it now is AI. You can throw a code base into these machines and say, hey, I'm a security researcher. What are the vulnerabilities? And it'll spit you out faithfully.
Really?
Grab your favorite open source project, toss it into
An
Gemini
AI.
or a ChatGPT. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. So in terms of like a vulnerable attack, and we think back, over the last few months with WordPress in particular, and with WooCommerce, our biggest, plugin. managed to have code inside its system that effectively allowed a customer to a hacker with, well, actually not really even a hacker, anyone
Yeah,
with
anyone.
anyone to basically make 3 calls to any WordPress site and add a new password, or sorry, add a new administrator. In
Yeah.
fact, that one was even more elegant. You could not even have to add the administrator. All you had to do was tell WordPress that the next person that logged on or registered was going to be an administrator, and then just sign up. How does Monarchs cope with those sort of challenges?
I mean, those are incredibly challenging, for sure. That particular one, we did multiple prongs because the attack was so, uh, for lack of a better term, it was good. It was a really good find. It was a really bad piece of code that they're exploiting, and so we had to clean up the users that came in. We had to get rid of the malware, the tools that they dropped, and then as soon as possible identify and try to block it kind of at the network layer, as well as attempt to, in patch stack does this, to attempt in the cases where it works. I don't actually think WooCommerce was able to do that, or we were able to do it, but sometimes you can hack a patch in for the security vulnerability back into the actual tool before the person upgrades, and patch stack is
Yeah,
absolutely
that was what
brilliant.
PatchTack was doing for that, and they
Exactly.
I believe were the only people that hadn't upgraded that particular combination of plugins. It was WooCommerce and WooCommerce, something else. There was a combination of things that you had to have installed, but PatchTack was the only ones that survived that.
And
Um,
I just want to say shout out to anyone from PatchTack who's looking. Their security team. I mean, we all have specialties.
yeah,
You've got to, and theirs is quite
mm,
good. I really a lot of respect for that
yeah.
team.
Well, one of the questions that's come in was talking about, are there things that WordPress developers can, or site owners can do? And one of the questions was things like masking WordPress, um, preventing the outside world from thinking that you've got a WordPress site. Are those sort of things effective at all?
So the problem with that is, in order to be a WordPress site at the technical level, when you're interacting with it, it has to interact as a WordPress site. And what I mean by that is, if you were to go and get those mass exploitation tools, they're not interacting with the site the way you or I are interacting with the site.
Yeah,
They're interacting at a protocol level.
yeah,
And at the protocol level, you can't mask it. It is a WordPress site. So I wouldn't spend too much time trying to mask. You're not going to have someone, unless you're Chase, you're not going to have someone going, a human, to your site and being like, oh,
yeah,
neat, that's not a WordPress site. I'll bail. It's just
yeah.
tools and machines.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose we're looking at file paths and Ajax, but we're also looking at what's in headers and other sorts of bits of data. I guess that's a valid question. Another question that came in was about, again, we're talking about social engineering previously. Are there other things that we can do intelligently to avoid being socially engineered?
So first, I notice it's making it worthless, especially over the phone. Uh, One of the we often bust actual criminal organizations,
Mm, yeah.
and one of the scariest that we did was, this organization had custom calls generated for users, MP3 files just sitting on the disk, and they were customized by AI. They sounded exactly like the different banks
Mm,
that call you, the robo ones. Exactly. They had names. They had information to prove that it was them calling. They just slip into the conversation. So, like, birth dates, socials if they had them,
mm,
whatever it was, and they'd, instead of asking you for it, they'd say, "Is your birth date?" And again, these were customized to individuals.
mm,
I would be willing to bet that those were wildly successful, that
mm.
organization made a ton of money from those. It was terrifying. So yes, the just monkey calling, maybe not as effective, but
Mm.
that's not cutting edge anymore.
You put an AI behind it, and
It's scary. It really is.
um, a lot of security tools talk about signatures or how they identify, plugins. So they and sort of we have CVS reports, and then they'll have a signature library that you know says, well, if this signature matches, then that's malware. But with all of the latest tricks with obtrusification and scrambling of data, and is that signature world relevant today, where it may have been much more relevant, 10 years, 15 years ago?
So you're always going to have a subset of malware that will fall or be vulnerable to that. It's always going to exist. The problem is, to your point, it's very easy to obfuscate this stuff. And so for people who don't know, signature is just looking at the bytes and saying, "Oh, look, I see the bytes king defacer in here, therefore malware. It's out." Um, there's no reason that the malware author has to put their handle into it. In fact, there's no reason the malware authors have to use anything that even is remotely malicious in their code. It's amazing what you can do to create code that looks completely legitimate and is actually malicious. And so what we've found, the only way that we can think of and have been able to do this is to tear it apart and to ask what is going to be executing this, to ask it what it actually is going to do. And it boils off all of that obfuscation, and then it presents it. This is what it's going to do. And at that layer, then you can do interesting things with, AI and machine learning, and, technically they're computer science signatures, but they're, based on much, much different things than the text. And so there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of really cool things in that space. But unfortunately, the just text-based stuff, it's not as effective as it once was. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I guess one last couple of thoughts before we sum up. When we're and this is an observation from, I guess, from what we see of monarchs. We've seen during our involvement with you guys a number of attacks that you guys seem to be discovering first, or discovering 0 day, whatever we want to call it. Um, uh, how do you differentiate that between, sort of, is it malware? Is it not malware? Is it just someone who's got something intelligent in their code?
That is actually very difficult, although I would consider it more having stupid things in their code than malware. But it's incredibly difficult. Is what I have my team do. Although I'll give you a fun, simple way that we actually get a fair chunk of malware from this one group. They actually have a target they go after every single time for the first test of their new malware. And so we literally just monitor this target. And the new tool will drop, and we're like, "Well, that was dumb." You know what I mean? Like it's insane that people do this. For some of the other ones, though, you actually have to do a fair bit of analysis. You're looking at 1 million novel a day, and so you have to do a great deal of aggregation and analysis behind the scenes. And that's actually where the machine learning really comes in. People think of it as, oh, you can classify a malware. You don't want it to do the final classification. There's statistical reasons for that. But it is really, really good at aggregating groups so that a human can step back and say, oh, wow, this entire swath of thing, it's the same thing obfuscated differently, or it's the same thing written, by an AI differently, or whatever. I can get rid of this entire swath at once. And so that's how we stay ahead of these things. And like I was mentioning, we're centralized. So if we see it somewhere else in the world, for them, it's a new thing that we're seeing. We're moving as quickly as we can, and hopefully we get it before there's anybody even knows it exists. That's the norm. But for everybody else in the world, it never existed. Everybody else is inoculated as soon as we see it, as soon as we identify it. And so it is an important benefit of centralized information.
Yeah. Rob, it's been a pleasure as always. Great to chat. And I hope the people joining us today have gotten some insights out of it as well, and a little bit more understanding of the realities of malware. I think sometimes we almost go, "Oh yeah, malware. Yeah, it might happen to someone else. Yeah, it might happen to someone else." Thanks for your time. Before I go, just a quick one update for our Rapid customers and for people in our audience. There'll be a link doing the rounds. We've just joined Product Hunt. Product Hunt is a project that allows us to publish information about our tools and our tech stack. We're featured on Product Hunt this week. The links are around. We'd love your feedback. We'd love people to jump on and have a go at Product Hunt. It doesn't just benefit us; it benefits all of the participants and customers and services that we utilize inside Rapid as well, and helps people understand how platforms like Rapid come together, the sort of products and services that we utilize as well. So anyone that's around, check out the Product Hunt links. They'll be posted down below here in our social feeds over the next coming weeks. So again, Rob, thank you for your time. We appreciate it as always. And to everyone else, keep an eye out for our up-and-coming webinars. We're going to be trying to do them initially fortnightly, then hopefully moving to one a week early in next year, with a couple of big ones planned around WordCamps. We'll be in WordCamp Asia next year. We'll also be at WordCamp Europe and also in WordCamp US, and we'll be doing live webinars from those events as well.
And my camera said goodbye.
And Rob said goodbye. So again, thank you everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.
Have a great day, everybody.
Cheers, Rob.